Today we're going to talk about who may run for president in the Philippines. But first, a disclaimer. The speaker expresses his views and opinions in his personal and professorial capacity. They do not in any way represent the views, opinions, and policies of the Commission on Elections, where he works as Regional Election Attorney of Region 7. Assumptions made in any analysis do not reflect the position of the COMELEC. That he is employed by the COMELEC does not mean it endorses this channel or its contents. The COMELEC does not represent or warrant the accuracy, applicability, and completeness of its contents and instructions. The COMELEC likewise disclaims any liability to any party from any damage arising from direct or indirect use of statements and instructions of the speaker. The contents are for informational and educational purposes only. Can you read and write this? That's ABC. If yes, you can be president. The reason is because you don't need a college degree to become Philippine president. The basis is no less than the 1987 Constitution, which says that insofar as literacy requirement is concerned, ability to read and write is enough. And that particular provision for qualification to become presidency has been widely criticized for being too minimal. The reason is because if you're going to hire ordinary employees, maybe in the government and even in the private sector, the list of qualifications can be very, very long. Number one, it requires probably that you be a college graduate with relevant experience, and it also requires several clearances. However, how come that when we talk about the presidency, it only requires that you're able to read and write? I think the answer is that is the price you have to pay for being in a democracy. The reason is because in a democracy, it is the people that has the ultimate authority to decide on who they want to be as their president. And so, the other reason there is because maybe the framers of the Constitution decided it wise to democratize equal opportunities to public service. Exactly why it minimized the qualifications to public office so that anybody can fit the bill. Again, that is the price you have to pay for being in a democracy. Provided, however, you're also a natural-born Filipino, a resident of the country for at least 10 years immediately preceding election day, a registered voter, and at least 40 years old on election day. Let's talk about them one by one. A natural-born Filipino is a citizen of the Philippines from birth without having to perform any act to acquire perfect Filipino citizenship. Probably just like most of us, we are natural-born Filipinos. How did we know we are? Because our parents told us we are Filipinos. Aside from that, they probably presented to us that document that says we are Filipinos, and that document is otherwise known as the birth certificate. Did we participate in the preparation of that birth certificate? Chances are we did not. Exactly why we didn't do anything to acquire or perfect our Filipino citizenship. Is that definition absolute? Not necessarily, because that is actually subject to two exceptions. One of them is if you're born before January 17, 1973, of Filipino mother, who upon reaching the age of majority elected Filipino citizenship. Does not election of Filipino citizenship amount to doing something to acquire or perfect your Filipino citizenship? Yes. So does that make you less of a natural-born Filipino? The answer is not necessarily, because as a matter of exception, the Constitution says even if you elected Filipino citizenship upon reaching the age of majority, you are still considered natural-born Filipino as a matter of exception. The other exception is if you are a former Filipino or natural-born Filipino, you went abroad, you naturalized as a citizen in another country. However, years after, probably you went back, realized that you wanted to be Filipino again. You applied for repatriation. Does not repatriation amount to a positive act to acquire or perfect your Filipino citizenship? Yes. So does that make you less of a natural-born Filipino? Not necessarily, because, again, that is a matter of exception. Of course, you must be a registered voter anywhere in the Philippines. The reason is because the constituency of the president pertains to the entire country. So there is no peremptory requirement for you to be in a particular city or municipality for as long as that city or municipality pertains to the territory of the Republic of the Philippines. And the other qualification, of course, is residence. The period is at least 10 years prior to election day. Question: do you have to be in the country, actually and physically present, for you to qualify insofar as residence requirement is concerned? Not necessarily, because there is such a thing as domicile. What is a domicile? The domicile is your place of origin. So, for example, you were born and raised in the Philippines. That is your place or country of origin. However, few years later, you probably left the country to either study or to work or for any other reason. Then, years after, you decided to come back. Now, when you left the country, it is assumed by law that you had all the intention to return to the country even if you're out of it for a period of time. So, what happens there is your physical absence in the country was replaced by your continuing intention to return to the country, because in election law, domicile and residence mean one and the same thing, they're interchangeable. So your physical absence in the country was replaced by your continuing intention to return to the country, because the Philippines is your place of origin, otherwise known as your domicile. And you have to be at least 40 years old on election day. Why 40 years old? Probably the framers of the Constitution thought it wise that 40 years old, there is a presumption that you already acquired enough experience and probably wisdom to hurdle the rigors of the presidency. Question: what about the vice president? The vice president has the same qualifications as that of the president. Why so? Because actually the vice president is a president in waiting. If something happens to the president, like for example, if the president dies, is permanently incapacitated, resigns, or impeached, the vice president becomes president. Another question: how long should the president stay as such? The answer is found in the Constitution. It says the president, including the vice president, are elected for a term of 6 years. So the other question is, can the president be re-elected to another term of office? The Constitution says the president shall not be eligible for any re-election. Take note, it uses the word any. It means that right after your term of office, or even if there was an interval, you cannot anymore run for, much less be elected as Philippine president. Question: how come President Joseph Estrada, after being elected in 1998, was allowed to run in 2010? Yes, he was allowed to run in 2010. The reason is because when a petition to disqualify him was lodged before the COMELEC said that the phrase that says the president shall not be eligible for any re-election applies only to incumbent presidents. And so because Joseph Estrada was not anymore incumbent president during the time, it was Gloria Arroyo he was allowed to run for the presidency. Of course, the petition was brought to the Supreme Court. However, the Supreme Court refused to rule on the ground that it did not anymore bring a justiciable controversy because there was a supervening event while the case or petition was pending before the Supreme Court. And what was that supervening event? That supervening event is the fact that President Benigno Aquino III was already elected, proclaimed, and assumed office as president. In other words, according to the Supreme Court, the issue of controversy on whether or not the president can still be eligible for any re-election has been rendered moot and academic by virtue of the defeat of Joseph Estrada in that particular presidential elections. The other question is, how come Gloria Arroyo, after succeeding as president in 1998 or 2001, was allowed to run for president and was in fact elected president in 2004? Does not the Constitution say no person who succeeded president and served as such for more than 4 years qualify for election to the same office at any time? Take a look there, it specifies a certain period of time. If you served as such for more than 4 years, you cannot anymore qualify for the presidency the second time around. But then because Gloria Arroyo succeeded the presidency after Joseph Estrada voluntarily stepped down by virtue of people power, and the term of office, the balance that was left behind by Joseph Estrada, was less than 4 years, Gloria Arroyo qualified to run for and was in fact elected president. Another question: may an incumbent or former president run for or be elected vice president? There are two answers to this question. According to the rules of statutory construction, the way to construe a constitution is this. Number one, go to the plain language of the law. If you look at the plain language of the constitution, nowhere do you find there that the former president or incumbent president is prohibited to run for or be elected vice president. And so if there is no express prohibition, necessarily you can still be elected president. That is insofar as the plain language of the law is concerned. However, still according to the rules in statutory construction, if the plain language of the Constitution or the law, its application defeats the purpose of the law or the Constitution, that plain language, even in the absence of ambiguity, can still be set aside to give way to the intent of the framers of the Constitution. So what is the intent of the framers of the Constitution? They said the president must only serve for 6 years, and the presidency is a once in a lifetime opportunity. The reason is because, accordingly, 6 years is long enough for a good president to implement his program of action, but short enough for a bad president to impose his evil design. And so, there again, the presidency is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So, now, what is its implication insofar as the former president or incumbent president running for and be elected as vice president? If he or she is elected vice president, it means that he is again next in line to the presidency. And so if the president dies, is permanently incapacitated, impeached, or voluntarily resigns, the vice president, who was a former president, can now be president again by virtue of succession. And that could not have been the intention of the framers of the Constitution. However, if an actual case or controversy involving this particular question transpires in the future, let's wait and see how the Supreme Court construes the provision that says the president shall not be eligible for any re-election. Thank you.